Hi, and thanks for listening to the Clive Barker Podcast, episode 120, Everville. So Jose, Rob, and me, I'm Ryan, finally got to the episode we've been promising for months, Everville, the second book of the art. What do you think about this great second book of an as-yet unfinished trilogy? After you listen to this episode, maybe add your thoughts in the comments. So this episode was recorded a couple of weeks back, June 23rd, 2016. The Duels of Blood results of round 2 kind of preempted this episode, so we ended up putting that one first, so that they were recorded in the opposite order. But while we're on the subject, here's a few highlights of the Duels of Blood over at www.duelsofblood.com, so go vote now. So, starting off in the Hellraiser bracket, the female Cenobite is neck and neck with Butterball. Literally, they are one vote apart. Each one is they're so close to each other. That one you just don't know. And we've had both of them, the actors there, Simon Bamford and Barbie Wilde, on the podcast, and we love them both. So we're happy to see that, and we'll see how that turns out. CD versus Julia. This is Julia is trouncing him by a landslide. 102 votes for Julia, only 2 votes for CD. Somebody obviously felt sorry for him, or else they just really like compact discs. In the magical bracket, we've got Christopher Carrion versus Mr. Hood. Christopher Carrion is beating Mr. Hood by a huge amount, 84% of the votes going to Christopher Carrion, proving that the house does not always win. We've got Jimothy Terry versus Pio Pa. Jimothy Terry is winning, and so the Gang of Cats beats the Mistiff. We've got, in the Nightbreed bracket, Cabal is beating Decker with 80% of the votes. So Cabal beating Decker just like what happened in the movie. One last dance. We've got Narcisse versus Ashbury. So Narcisse has 87% of the votes. So it's not always fighting prowess or scariness. Sometimes it's personality that wins out. In the bloody bracket, we've got Candyman versus Tesla Bombeck. So Candyman's got 72% of the votes. At this point, Tesla Bombeck is trailing with only the other remaining 28%. And last, we've got Harvey Swick versus the City of Popolac. And this is very close race. Only 2 votes apart, with Harvey Swick leading right now, but it could go the other way just as easily. So thanks. If you want to vote, go over to www.duelsofblood.com and put your vote in. And you remember, you can vote every 5 minutes. So if you really want to campaign hard for somebody, you can make a big difference. This episode is brought to you by Jordy Calendar. Jordy is a customizable calendar and organizer with icons, themes, wallpapers, and settings available to make your calendar look the way you want it. So if you have an iPhone or an iPad, Jordy can sync with the default iOS calendar, so you don't need to re-enter your calendar appointments. And if you don't have an iPhone, don't worry, Jordy's on Android also. If you use Google Calendar, Jordy can sync with your Google Calendar events, and Jordy also offers their own cloud service, Jordy Cloud, to keep your entries backed up and keep your calendar in sync if you have a smartphone and a tablet. So Jordy has a unique feature called Event Calendars, where you can follow calendar events of some of your favorite topics. For horror fans, you can stay up to date with horror movie news from Shock Till You Drop, and there's all kinds of other things you can subscribe to on Jordy calendars that'll just pop right in there. You can add the weather forecast to know if it's going to rain or snow in the coming days ahead. There are many other event calendars available in Jordy, so to add them, you just click the calendar icon in the lower left toolbar of Jordy, tap Add Event Calendar, and then browse and search the directory and add any event calendar you're interested in. So we'd love for you to give Jordy a try. Just search for it on the App Store or on Google Play. It's spelled Jorte. But if you want them to know you got it from us, please do use the custom link http://bit.ly/pinheadcalendar. So bit.ly/pinheadcalendar. That's our special link so that they'll know you heard about it from the Clive Barker podcast. And we do thank them for their support. And now, let's move on to our discussion about Everville. So finally, we get to talk about Everville. It's we've been talking about how that's going to be our next episode for, like, months. And it just never worked out. A lot of it was just because I couldn't get it read fast enough, or we would have other things come up, other interviews, or
other books.
Yeah, and our Kickstarter thing really threw a wrench into this too. But and all of the commentaries that we're doing for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've been fun. I think the next one's going to be the Books of Blood, so looking forward to that.
Yeah, that'll be awesome.
Yeah, I like that movie.
But here we are we finally made it to Everville, second book of the art.
Yay!
And I think we timed this one, so I think the last book we did was The Great and Secret Show, right? So now we're on to the second book of the art.
It sounds pretty good.
So now if only Clive would write the third book of the art here in the next couple of months, then we could put all three together, but that's probably not going to happen.
Hey, it'll come.
Yeah.
We'll get it someday, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you guys remember not too long ago, but I'm saying not too long ago. It might have been like a year or 2 years ago. But Clive tweeted something about, I finally figured out how to finish the books of the art. So that was exciting. That was an exciting tweet.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, and he had kind of figured out the narrative path that he wanted to take the third book of the art, which is pretty cool. So, rereading this book, for me, it's been probably 20 years or more since I've read it, so it was almost like reading it for the first time. What was it like for you guys? Did you like it better or more or less than the first time?
Do you want to go ahead?
I read it about a year ago, and I read The Great and Secret Show a year ago.
Oh, okay.
Too. And after reading The Great and Secret Show, which is one of my top five favorite novels by Clive Barker. Everville is good, but I think there's some parts where it suffers at, and one part I think it suffers at, it doesn't have enough for me. Joe Beth and Howie.
Oh,
and I thought that was really missing from this book, and because they were so big in the previous book. I really liked their relationship, and I don't know. I didn't like the new kind of romance that was brought up with Joe Flicker and
Phoebe.
Phoebe, yeah, I didn't like those characters all that much. I didn't hate them. I just I wasn't really into their stories.
It was a strange. The first time I read it, that whole thing about taking the two characters. You remember in Karate Kid where like he beats up the bad guys and he gets the girl at the end of Karate Kid, and then Karate Kid 2 he was like, oh yeah, she left me for a football player.
Yeah, that's at the very beginning.
Yeah, and this is kind of like that. It's like we build up this this romance for the whole Great and Secret Show, and then you get to Everville and like now set him on fire.
Yeah.
Right. I'm gonna share my experience. First of all, there's two mindsets for reading a book. One of them is when you just bought the book and you don't know anything about the book, and which was the first time I read this book was in the mid 90s, I guess. That's when it came out, and I just devoured the book in like a week or something, and I really enjoyed it. I felt a little strange that some characters that I thought were dead were brought back, but I was like, well, it's fine because Clive managed to work it out pretty well in telling us why they're coming back. Regarding Howie Katz and Joe Beth and the Tommy, the deaf boy, I just thought, and this goes completely against what Rob said. It's just my personal opinion. I thought I could have done without them in this book, in the storyline. But
because they're not really used. I mean,
yeah,
they really don't need to be there. I can agree with you on that.
They have sad lives.
Yeah,
and they don't contribute anything.
They got a dead bedroom, nothing happens, and it's like, it's just. One of the things that I realized when I was reading the book this time was there's way too many characters in the book. It's just very, very dense and complex. But it's not it doesn't hinder the book too much, but it's like it's sometimes a little hard to, to keep track of what's going on with so many different storylines.
Well, and you know what I felt this time around? I felt like this is a combination of the Great and Secret Show and Imagica. Because Imagica totally, the first time I read it, totally bogged me down with too many characters that I couldn't keep track of. But then reading it the second time, it was much better.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know. I mean, I think I liked Everville a lot better this time around too. I think for the same reason. And there were some revelations in there that I had no idea. I couldn't remember at all that Kissoon was Maeve O'Connell's son. Oh, and by the way, I guess I'll put this in the intro, but we're going to spoil this book because it's from 1994. And if pause this and just go read the book before you listen.
Yes, that's a good advice. That's good, solid advice. But I like the fact that Clive put a lot of backstory into this. He said so himself in his intro that sometimes that this is supposed to be a trilogy, and he thinks he knows that there's problems that are presented by the middle books, like that they exist in kind of a no man's land between the pleasures of the beginning and the dramas of the final act. This is like taken from the introduction. So he wanted to break those rules, and he started the story earlier than the first book. He takes us back to the time when people were going from Missouri, was it? Missouri to Oregon?
Montana, I think.
Yeah, you're right.
Like that.
Missouri.
And they depart from Independence, Missouri in like the 1800s. And I like the concept of building America and how the cities were being built by these people who were just taking an enormous gamble and just let's put all our stuff in a wagon. Let's gather up a bunch of people who are willing to go stake a claim in like the middle of nowhere, and let's go and build a new city, and
basing it on their faith. Their religious faith.
It's something that in Europe we don't have that much, because in Europe we don't have nearly as much land, so all the land has been already claimed centuries ago. And so that's the glory part of building America. That's like adventure and stuff. So that really adds to the book, I think, and all the backstory that he adds to the characters.
I think that was cool too, because it really did go against expectations. When Everville first came out, I expected it to just take off right where Great and Secret Show started. I didn't expect there to be a whole backstory about pioneers and Budenbaum, throwing in a new sort of semi-villain, I guess. Budenbaum, is he a villain? What do you guys think? Owen?
Go ahead, Jose.
Okay, I'll start while you think about it, because it's kind of a complicated question.
Yeah, it is.
In technical sense, I think you can say that he's a villain. But he's a very complicated character, because when I was reading it the second time, no, it's not the second time. This is like my third or fourth time reading the book, probably third. But he's like an archetype of Clive Barker stories, in the sense that he's a larger than life character with a big beard.
Storyteller.
Very wise in the ways of the world. When I say bigger than life, he's a little more than human as well. Yeah. And so he's like a cosmic play. What do you call the guy, the person who directs the adaptation of a play into English is a second language to me. I'm trying to come up with a play director.
Yeah.
He's like a director of a play for the Jai-Wai, which are these cosmic creatures that, just like to see history, like to see life unfold, and it's weird. But so I think he's put in a difficult position because of the nature of the Jai-Wai. He's
using them.
Yeah, they do use him as kind of their personal, play director.
Yeah.
He sets things in motion, and then he creates these moments where something's going to go down, and so the Jai-Wai come and they see it, and they witness it, and that's what Budenbaum does for them, I guess.
Well, and there's also sort of a desperation in him that and it sort of reminds me of the story.
His function.
It sort of reminds me of the storyteller of, in Clive Barker too, that he's got this sort of desperation that he's going to lose his audience. When they start taking an interest in Tesla, he goes nuts. Mm-hmm. He wants to kill her.
Yeah, and it's like he's being fired by the DIY. It's like, all right, she's gonna be the one who's gonna show us life, for the rest of the millennium. There's some millennium tension in this book as well.
It's kind of like, people will like reading Harry Potter now.
Yes, that's right. But this book was written in the mid-'90s, which was a time when the pre-millennium tension was also starting to rise in artwork and literature, and so it's not a coincidence that one of the things that one of the lines that is brought back into this book was Kissoon's "Let's fuck for the millennium." And then they ask Tesla, the DIY ask Tesla to be their, to work for them for the next millennium. So. Yeah, it's interesting, and I really like. So basically, the question was: is Owen Bodenbaum a villain? Yes, he's a villain, but he's a little sympathetic in some ways.
Kind of like most villains in his Clive Barker books. Like, what's the
Jaff?
From the Jaff. But my favorite one is the one from Damnation Game.
Oh yeah, Mamulian.
Yeah, that's my favorite. That's my favorite one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with Jose. He's a bad guy, but with some,
with some flair.
Yeah, some flair.
Yeah. Except for Kissoon. Kissoon's just a little shit.
Yeah. Holy cow!
I can't stand that guy. I thought for a minute, that's what I thought. I was like, oh, cool, Fletcher's back.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he built it up. He built, because I really liked Fletcher.
Yeah, that was really good. Really well done. I thought so too.
And when it turned out to be Kinston, I was like, man, I hate this guy.
And it's been so long since I read this. I had remembered like, everybody comes back from the dead, but it's really not. It's really just the ones that we thought for sure were dead were Kissoon and the Death Boy, right, and Tommy Ray.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and they came back.
Well, Tommy Ray's kind of undead.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So what does that even mean? I can't remember how was he trapped in the loop? How was he supposedly killed in the Graded Secret Show?
I don't remember. It's a very big book, so I'm not entirely sure how he escaped, but I can't tell you that.
I can't remember that either. So.
But so the book starts in 1848 in the spring, where 83 souls depart from Independence, Missouri. 31 are alive when the book starts because, obviously there's a lot of people died from like disease and accidents and, just regular harsh life back then when they were traveling. And there's this girl called Maybe, is that how you pronounce it?
I thought it was Maeve, but I don't know. That's
okay, because I'm not familiar with Irish names, so I was just wondering. Maeve O'Connell, she's a 12-year-old. Her dad is called Harmon, and they have plans to build a city when they get to wherever it is they're getting. And so her dad met Owen Bodenbaum, and he entrusted Harmon with a very special secret. And this is where in the first part of the book, this is where it connects to the shoal and the events of the first book, right?
Yeah, because it's a shoal medallion.
It's a medallion. Yeah, medallion.
So it's very interesting that the medallion was supposed to be. First of all, he has to build a city. And is it explained if this was something that Bodenbaum did or if it was Harmon who did it? I think it was Harmon that planned out the whole city. The seed was just planted by Owen.
Yeah, I think it was Bodenbaum, but he came back later in the book and said that this city isn't really anything like I'd planned, and because it was kind of taken secondhand, and he had really never expected Maeve to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but so the opening is really, really cool. I'm particularly I was particularly drawn in by the whole first part of the book, where we follow these people traveling through America, and then all of a sudden it gets into Clive Barker territory where they one day they go to like this wood, and I'm not going to go beat by beat with the story, but I'm just trying to explain that the beginning that's very it's very enticing, very seductive, and of course these people are all driving their wagons, and they come across this wood on a mountain, and we start hearing like these horns blowing, and as usual, it's another one of those moments where Clive Barker brings the miraculous into the mundane world. And these trumpets are not from the pioneers. They're not from the people who are traveling. They're coming from up the mountain. And when people go to investigate, they discover a creature with wings. And that's where the adventure really starts picking up. So
it's a creepy little scene when you first hear the horns and through and find the winged creature named Coker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that was a very tense little scene.
Mm-hmm. I particularly like the fact that what's happening is a ceremony, and it's something that I was reading the book again for this, and now that I've read more stuff, and thanks to the podcast that I've analyzed so much stuff and discussed it with you guys, I started seeing like little recurring themes into this book. And one of them that seems to be Clive Barker likes to create these moments where these miraculous creatures are having ceremonies. And it's like you have that in Maximilian Bacchus. You have that in Weave World. You have that in Animal Life, that short little story. That first novella that he wrote about the Duchess that wanted to have a party inside a big forest.
The wood on the hill.
The wood on the hill, yeah. So it seems like sometimes he reuses these ideas, these scenarios or tableaus in his works over and over, which makes sense because that's his style. So,
do you guys think? Because I was thinking about that opening. It's a long time, when you're reading the Everville. It's a long time before of reading this opening, thinking, what has this got to do with the Great and Secret Show? So, but do you think that Everville could be read by somebody without reading the Great and Secret Show first? I mean, I personally, I don't. I wouldn't recommend it.
When I first read it, that's what I did. Because that was the year Lord of Illusions came out, and I really wanted to read it because I'd read a review of it in Fangoria, and I was into Harry D'Amour, which was my big favorite part about this book, is because of Harry, so how it goes into him.
Yeah.
And I read it fine to answer your question. It didn't really bother me, but I was like, I knew I had to go back and know who some of these characters were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But, no, as an individual story, it worked fine for me.
I would say the same. Yeah, I think some of these characters, you might not know exactly what their backstory is, but through the story, I think Clive drops enough hints that will let you know between characters talking to each other, and it's like they will discuss what happened in the first books. I think you can probably read this book on its own, and that's one of the things that Clive Barker mastered was the first Great and Secret Show. I thought it was kind of self-contained. If it had stopped there, I would have been happy with it. The second book, I also think it's pretty, self-contained. So I'm curious to see where he's going to take the story for the third part.
Yeah. Well, and we know that Budenbaum is still alive, I guess, right? And Kissoon is still alive.
Yeah. And the yacht are still trying to get into the Cosm. So
yeah. Yeah, and all the bad guys hate Tesla.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
At least Raoul has a body again. So
yeah, I like that. But there were some good humor with him and Tesla, talking back each other. As she had just slept with that guy Lucian.
Yeah.
Right.
But she was talking in Raoul's voice.
Yeah, and he flips it.
Freaked out.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Raoul was stuck in her mind because Kisune had taken his body in the first one, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think so. Yeah, that's if I recall. I don't remember the Great and Secret show very much because it's been a while. But so there's a time when Tesla's complaining that she's been living like a nun because Raul is like, no sex while I'm inside your head.
Yeah, he just he don't want to feel
that. I don't have a homosexual bone in my body.
Yeah, so. And I kind of got the feeling that was sort of a commentary that bigoted people are apes.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, certainly.
Unevolved, I guess.
On the other hand, it's like Buddenbaum is the villain, and he's pretty gay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's not the biggest villain. He's a little bit more sympathetic towards the end.
Yeah, and I think he's not particularly gay. It's more like he'll do whatever it takes to complete his mission, I guess.
Yeah.
He'll just use people in a way that as long as it gives him some pleasure, then he's okay with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you were saying. So what does this have to do with the Great and Secret show? And basically the thing is that there's doorways between our world and the world of Quiddity, the metacosm, right? So there's the cosm and the metacosm.
Yeah.
And we're the humans that they call the sapes humana, which is like the human race. And so I think that Clive explained in this book that there's a very intimate relationship between the cosm and the metacosm in the sense that we create each other. Maybe the cosm creates the metacosm more than vice versa, but we're very connected to our own dreams, which are the stuff that drives our world forward, or drives our life forward, I thought. So it's you will see a lot of familiar expressions being spoken by people from the metacosm, and even names that are reused from our world in the metacosm. For example, that people from the metacosm say, use "Oh Lord" as an interjection when Jesus wasn't from Quiddity, so how would they know how to use the word, that expression, "Oh Lord," or talk about God, or talk English for that matter, speak English? Because,
they come from us. I mean, there's some kind of a dream link between them and us.
Mm-hmm. That's what I thought was fantastic. It's that we create this fantastic world, and it shapes our world almost as much as we shape it. And the Yaru-Ouroboros are like the dark stuff in our subconscious that kind of rises up to the surface.
And they exist beyond the ephemeris, so they're sort of. I guess you're right. It would be like the subconscious because you don't normally see it all the time.
Yeah, it's like our id or something.
Yeah. Fleas in mountains.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say in my notes. They're called fleas in mountains.
Yeah. And there's a lot more description of them, but it still is still really hard to picture. I mean, if you were making a TV show of the books of the art, how would you make them look? In the comic adaptation of the Great and Secret show by IDW, they looked like these big armored giants.
Yeah, I like that adaptation.
I've never read the comic book, so I don't. But
they were like humanoid, but they were giants and they had armor.
I like that adaptation, but that's not how I envisioned them first. The way I've envisioned them reading the book was just these roiling black clouds.
Yeah.
Really, like these globs of stuff that were just like a big storm cloud,
tornado or something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So.
I have to agree with you on that. That's how I would picture it too. It's interesting. I'll have to check out the adaptation for the book. I've always wanted to.
It's really good. I had wished that I wish that they had the budget to go on and do Everville. They wanted to, but that was shut down. But they did get to finish the Great and Secret show.
So Tesla's back, and she's described. We get a little more information about Tesla in this book. Clive tells us that she was born in Philadelphia. She grew up in Detroit. And the events of this book start like 5 years after the events of the first book.
Yeah, which is the same time frame between the publication of the books.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's convenient. And so what she's doing at the time when she's introducing the story is she's visiting Palomo Grove on a bike. And she does visit Palomo Grove, and she goes to that shopping mall where Fletcher dies in the first book.
Yeah.
And she finds some people there, and these people are telling her that they've been hearing that Fletcher's back, and that he's returned, and she talks to Nathan Grillo, which is the guy who runs the Reef. And I thought the Reef was a very interesting invention by Clive, if a little unrealistic, because this is the early times of the internet. I mean, it was 93 or something, or 94.
Right. Well, and did it start in the Great and Secret Show? I think so. That would have been 89.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's funny because he's running the Reef on 3 computers.
Yeah.
Which nowadays, of course,
kind of dated.
Yeah. Nowadays, of course, it would be like, oh, this stuff is all in the cloud and it's all connected to the World Wide Web.
Yeah.
And obviously,
it's like in that movie Johnny Mnemonic. It's like I can hold 4 in my head. It's like 4 gigs, man. Now they got computers can hold like 400 gigs.
Yeah, I got like a 16 gig like USB pen in my pocket.
It's just he just makes a big deal out of it in the movie. Like I can hold 4 gigs.
You can get a micro USB card that's like 128 gigabytes.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's crazy. Yeah, but you know what? I would never buy that because if it gets lost or gets damaged, you just lose a bunch of stuff.
Yeah,
at the same time. Yeah. I mean, I've had like this is totally off topic, but I've lost so much stuff because I was storing it in like a hard drive, and it's like a 1 terabyte, and then something happens or it falls down or it just starts clicking, and you lost everything you had in it.
Yeah,
and it's like, all right. But so the Reef is this computer setup. And also, it's got fax machines and telephone lines and stuff. So Clive has never been a very technologically inclined person. So I'm trying to imagine him like coming up with something sophisticated that would have fax machines, for God's sake. But yeah. So there's the Reef, and the Reef is this fascinating thing where all this information is being stored in it, and it's cross-referencing all these weird things. We never really get much of an idea where this is coming from, though. All this information, all these reports.
Somehow the computers are scanning the news, but what's the source? I guess.
Back then the newspapers didn't even have websites.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Yeah, they didn't. They didn't like put microfiche on a database or anything. Right.
I go over that because it's just part of. It's part of the fantasy.
Said it wrong. If it was,
Yeah, now you could do all that, the Reef, with 1 computer.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you'll explain it for the 3rd book.
Yeah.
How that
maybe
works.
on the 3rd book, the Reef will be stored on a Dropbox.
It's a Google Doc.
Yeah. That would be fun. So Fletcher seems to be spotted in a bunch of reports, and so Tesla decides to investigate that. And Grillo is also a guy who, he's checking up on that, but he seems like a man who's almost consumed by the Reef, and the Reef takes. It seems like the Reef kind of overpowers whoever's running it because it's just all this information coming in and so it happens to Tesla as well at the end.
Yeah.
But so she goes to Palomo Grove, not Palomo Grove. She goes to Everville eventually to try to find more information about if Fletcher is alive or not. And the thing is, at this point in the story, it just keeps introducing new characters all the time. So it's a very slow build-up, but I think at the end it really pays off, even though the book, for me, seemed to have multiple endings, just like The Return of the King.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it had to kind of, now let's go back to Joe and Phoebe again. So
another triangle. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So in the end, there was never really any evidence that that Fletcher was alive. I mean, do you guys think that Fletcher was alive?
No, that was just Kassoon pretending.
Yeah. Well, there was a rumor.
I was hoping. I mean,
Raoul had heard a rumor that somebody at the monastery had seen Fletcher looking up at the sun.
Well, Clive, in this book, I mean, death is a very impermanent thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Joe at one point seems to die, but then he's not really dead, and we see all these specters coming back. And it reminded me of that some scenes in the Scarlet Gospels as well, when Harry D'Amour goes to visit Norma, who's hiding in the crumbling building, and then there's ghosts around there that kind of manifest. And the same thing happens here as well. And the same thing happens in Imagica, when the Imagica, after Hepexamendios dies, and the spirits just have nowhere to go, and they just start like making the atmosphere thicker, and the ghosts are just piling up in our plane of existence. And so yeah, I would imagine if death is such an impermanent thing in Clive Barker's work, who knows? Maybe Fletcher will come back as a Jedi ghost at some point.
That's right.
Or maybe exploding never really killed him in the first place. Maybe he just got dispersed and he can, come back together.
Because he got burned in the first book and then he turned into a shower of sparks, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So who knows? He had the art. I mean.
Yeah.
Because I just couldn't see him. I couldn't see Clive just killing off such an important character like that and not bringing him back. To an extent. So something. Or maybe bring back. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say maybe even Howard and Joe Beth might come back. I mean, there's no telling.
Probably not.
They died by an explosion, didn't they?
They caught on fire.
Yeah, they caught on fire.
They grabbed on.
They embraced in fire. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's kind of an awkward death scene. When I was reading that, I was like, oh, really? Ugh.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So the thing I think I liked is the way that Clive mixed a very white bread little city where there's the righteous people who are very religious, then there's the gossipy lady, then there's a woman who's having an affair with a black man. Oh my God, there's her racist husband. And in a way, it was kind of like, I've been listening to a lot of Prairie Home Companion recently, and so it seemed like Everville was kind of reminding me of Lake Wobegon a little bit.
Sounds like my hometown I grew up in, Brevard, North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it just sounds like it just has those kind of qualities to it where it looks so pretty on the outside, but underneath there's this kind of almost
festering.
To it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these towns are like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not saying all, but I know there was something in Brevard that I didn't feel was right.
I was particularly fond of the way that Clive described people dealing with the events of the first book. After the events of what happens, that people just in Paloma Grove, that things just kind of disappeared from the public attention. And the same thing happens in this book after the events of the Saturday and Sunday festival. When you go to the end of the book, he explains that people started being skeptical about the reality of what happened. It started drawing people who didn't believe the truth, but wanted to believe something else, like UFOs or New Age theories or conspiracy theories. So it reminded me a little bit in like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There's this character. He learns how to fly by throwing himself to the ground but failing to hit it. And then he starts flying over London. Yeah, that's how he flies. He needs to master the trick of throwing yourself to the ground but missing it. Yeah. And then you can just start flying. And then he would just start flying over London, but people wouldn't notice him even though he was doing it in plain view, because there was this thing where if someone saw something impossible, their brain would just kind of like shut it down and be like, nope, I didn't see that. It's not there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing of the rational world shutting out the events of the first book and the second book. And then life just moves on and people just kind of forget about it.
Isn't there a story also where the first ships that came to South America from Spain and Portugal were that the natives couldn't see them, like they were invisible to them because they didn't understand what they were looking at?
I never heard of that, but it's perfectly possible. I know that some of those natives thought that they were like gods or something. But in the book, Clive even makes a joke saying that Time magazine put like a picture of one of the characters that there's in the festival. There's this woman who kind of goes a little nuts, and she says the world is going to explode. And then there's a picture in Time magazine of this woman in the cover, and then the title was "Is America Losing Its Mind?" And
well, it was going to be a cover story, and then they moved it to like an inside one. They downgraded it.
Yeah. So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
The scene at the crossroads, and I guess there are two scenes at the crossroads, but what do you think of I was a little bit troubled, I guess, by Tesla going back on her word with Budenbaum and deciding, no, I'm going to take the art for myself. It's sort of a complex moment, I guess, for her character, and I guess you can kind of understand why she did it, but she really did go back on her word, and that kind of led to the downfall of Budenbaum.
Yeah, but she doesn't owe anything to Budenbaum.
Yeah, except that she promised him that she would leave town and he could take the art, and he promised that he would get rid of the EAD.
But then the Jaiwai also intervene, so it becomes a little complicated at the end, right?
Yeah, they sort of detain her.
I thought that the Jaiwai reminded me a little bit of some of the characters in Next Testament, and what I'm talking about is those three creatures, Wick and his two brother and sister.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me of the Jaiwai, but taken a different form. Because the events of Next Testament are also very cataclysmic, so it would make sense that something like the Jaiwai would be there to witness it.
Yeah, and they don't have the same kind of they don't have any sympathy for people and their lives, except that they want to look at it like it's fiction, I guess.
Yeah, but Tesla is someone who she doesn't follow any rules. She's pretty much a rule breaker character in the story. So I'm not surprised that she would go back on her word regarding that you were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't friends. So I mean,
no, not at all.
Didn't like each other very much. So
no, and she did bring the Jaiwai there, but she ended up using them herself instead of.
Yeah, how she screwed him over made Budenbaum not look so bad. Not like a total bad guy. Like I was just agreeing with Ryan's point about that because he did kind of get screwed over.
But then at the same, she notices that he's just like the Jaff and that he can't handle the art.
Yeah. You can't handle the truth.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Sure, yeah. I mean, Budenbaum's one of the coolest characters in this whole story. Although I was also very pleased to read more stuff about Harry the Moor, especially after reading the Scarlet Gospels.
Yeah.
And knowing a lot more about what happened in Wyckoff Street. Finally in this book, people are given the full rundown of what happened in Wyckoff Street. Yeah.
And that's presented in Lord of Illusions, right? That's what he's thinking about when we first come upon him.
Yeah.
Being met by Loomis, that's what that paper's talking about. That story.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Right. The Brooklyn exorcism gone wrong in Brooklyn or something.
Yeah. Okay.
In Wyckoff Street.
Right.
And it's something that defines the character's nature. Every time that he shows up in a story, they bring up that.
Yeah. and I think Harry D'Amour is interesting in this series, he was kind of like, in the new Star Wars movie where Luke Skywalker shows up at the very end and he doesn't say anything. That's kind of Harry D'Amour in The Great and Secret Show.
Yeah.
He shows up at the very end. I mean, he talks a little bit, but he really...
He does like a little interview with Howie and Joe Beth.
Yeah, and he sort of puts them in witness protection.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in this book, he has a much bigger part, and he's a really a lot more interesting.
It shows that he's a very haunted human being.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he appears in part 4, which is actually called The Devil and Amour.
Yeah, I love that.
And I like the way that he's introduced, because there's this character called Ted, and he's a painter.
Yeah.
And so they're doing like a gallery art show of Ted's paintings, and one of them has Harry D'Amour, and Ted is also a magician. And so the way that they talk about these magicians that D'Amour knows, it kind of connects it to me to the Scarlet Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
It's not hard to imagine that Ted might have been one of the magicians that belonged to that group that is being killed off by Pinhead in the beginning of the Scarlet Gospels.
Right. If he didn't already get killed. Uh-huh. I like the description of that painting too. There was a painting of Harry D'Amour stepping on a snake, and it's sort of hopeful painting, that he's the hero that's going to fight the darkness, and it says the way Ted had laid the paint down on Harry's face, he'd practically carved the features: long nose, strong jaw, wide brow, and all. I
think they actually refer here that it was painted with that impasto technique, which is also something that Clive Barker uses a lot.
Yeah.
Clive Barker paints a lot with his palette knife, and there's a geography to his paintings sometimes that you can see in books like Imaginer and pictures that Phil and Sarah put up on their website. And also there's a symbolism in this painting, Bronx Apocalypse. That's the title of the painting, I think.
Yeah.
D'Amour and Wyckoff Street, where he's stepping on the little corner of the painting. He's stepping on a tiny black snake with red eyes. And it could refer not just the Antichrist, like they mention here, but the Yod, but also what happened of part 7, which is called the Leaves from the Story Tree, where actually Harry D'Amour, and this is a big spoiler, but he faces Lazy Susan again, and he actually just steps on it. He stomps it.
Yeah.
So that there's like a prophetic nature to that painting, in the sense that D'Amour does step on the devil. And,
so there was a little detail here that I was curious what you guys thought about, but there's a quote. It says, Harry had gathered the better part of a dozen tattoos over the last half-decade, all but 2 of which had been the handiwork of Otis Voigt, who specialized in what he called protective ink. So now Otis Voigt is the tattoo artist in this book, but in Scarlet Gospels, it's Kaz. So do you think that maybe he just got do you think he got a new guy, or do you think or do you think this is just a mistake?
I think that's a very good catch. And I think someone didn't do their homework and go back and read this.
Okay.
But, I mean, who knows? At this point, Norma actually teases him about it, says, you got a new one to tattoo from Voight, and she's like rubbing her fingers over the skin to see what the tattoo looks like. And it does mention that they're pretty much all done by Voight.
Yeah.
So, bringing in Kaz in Scarlet Gospel seems like either it's a new thing, like a new tattoo artist. I mean, the people around D'Amour keep dropping like flies just for it now.
Yeah.
Good catch.
Well, or maybe Kaz is the new guy that freshens up the tattoos, and I don't know. It's like 20 years later.
That's true. Yeah.
Oh, it gives him like a new gloss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am curious to know what the third book of the art's going to be like, if D'Amour is going to be in it, because is it going to be after the events of the Scarlet Gospels? Is it going to be before? That's going to be interesting.
I think knowing that the way that Clive Barker sets every novel in present time, I would say probably yes. I would think he's going to be blind.
Yeah, me too.
There you go. Yeah, I think that's a good possibility.
I'm also looking forward to the third book, how the world's changed in the past 20 years. touch on those kind of things. Sure.
Yeah. So the way that Harry D'Amour gets involved in the story is that not only is he knows Grillo and Tesla, but he gets this clue that there's a ceremony going down by the Zem Karasofia, and it's going to take place in, again, a triangle-shaped building in New York. I remember the Scarlet Gospels when the demon tells D'Amour, stay away from the triangle. So it seems like there's a thing going on with triangles and satanic powers. But or in this case, they're not satanic. That's the thing that kind of clashes a little bit. Yeah. That's the thing that kind of clashes a little bit between the mythologies of Scarlet Gospels and this, even though it has the same character. So it should be in the same world. But in this book, Everville, he realizes that the demons he's been fighting are not from hell at all. They're from the Metacosm. But in the Scarlet Gospels, they really come from hell.
Yeah. But then at the same time, the mythology of the books of the art is that we create these worlds. So like even Lazy Susan himself thinks that he's from hell. He's self-deluded, right? He's not trying to trick D'Amour. He actually believes it, and he goes nuts when he starts to hear Harry telling him something different.
Right. So you're thinking that there's both kinds of creatures. There are actually demons, and then there are creatures from the Metacosm, and that Harry has been meeting with both. But in this book, he starts out thinking that the Antichrist is coming, and then he thinks that the Yad is coming, or that the Yad are just a devil by another name. But then at the end, he dismisses the notion of religion, and when he's confronting the last, demon, quote unquote, he says, "No, I've met your kind. You're not from hell. Stop with that act because I don't believe in that." Yeah. So it seems like at the end, Harry kind of loses his faith in a way that these creatures come from hell. But then in Scarlet Gospels, they do come from hell.
Yeah, so I kind of am wondering if it's sort of a like a Neil Gaiman-esque sort of a thing where the dream world is sort of over the top of everything else. Where because like Tesla meets Jesus in Quiddity. So if he is there, if he comes, if his divinity, I guess, comes from our dreams or our collective unconscious, then maybe hell and demons do too.
But hell in the Scarlet Gospels has Lucifer,
and it's a physical place with it's underground with a roof made out of stone and.
Yeah, it's like blocked out from heaven.
Yeah,
it's
but I guess it's not under the earth because you have to go through like a magic portal to get there.
I think the only explanation that we can come up for this is that Harry D'Amour has met both kinds of creatures. So creatures that came from the Metacosm and Quiddity and the islands of the Quiddity, and then others who are actually from hell. Actual demons. But the ones from the Metacosm, maybe they were dreamt by people and they themselves believed to be fallen angels like Lazy Susan and but they're not. They're just like figments of someone's dream life that became real in the Quiddity world, and then they crossed over here somehow and decided that their mission is to be a demon, so they just cause mischief and harm, like people, creatures like Chat from that story,
Lost Souls. Yeah. Or look at Butterfield from Last Illusion. He was an attorney from hell.
Yeah. That's cool. So
maybe
I guess
also Clive wanted to just separate the worlds. He wanted to create with Scarlet Gospel his version of a certain type of hell too.
Yeah.
He could have just wanted to do that.
That's totally a possibility.
But we have one character that ties them together, right? I mean, we have.
I agree.
I guess we can't overanalyze it too much.
Yeah.
Well, ultimately, none of this is real. It's just fantasy. But
but it's interesting. I mean, that's why we're here. And we've got and we've also got these hints that Clive Barker was thinking of writing an overarching story that encompasses everything and ties all of his work together. This was like 10 years ago or something. I mean, I don't know if anything's ever going to come of that, but...
Are you talking about the Everything book?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's like 20 years ago.
Was it? Time goes by so fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Never even heard of it.
I kind of lost faith on that one because
it was just an interview with Phil and Sarah. I mean, I think that's the only time it's ever been mentioned.
Mm-hmm. In an interview with the Dread newsletter, Clive Barker was saying in '93 that he had the sequel written, Everville, The Art 2, Return to Quiddity. So that was like a tentative subtitle for the book at one point. He was going to say that the first volley of The Great and Secret Show opened a lot of metaphysical doors, as Imagica did. And he says that the genesis for the show was always very difficult because it was the most difficult book I ever wrote. In one sense, because halfway through it, I realized that the metaphysic I was attempting here was larger than the narrative I had constructed to contain it, and that the only way I could possibly write about what I had started was to expand the narrative scale. One of the weird things about going back to The Great and Secret Show and reading through it again is how unconsciously I seem to have left a lot of hooks for myself, some of which I can't talk about because it would really give away what I'm doing in the next book. The very obvious one is that the yacht are coming, but there are also all kinds of linguistic things that I did, things that were dropped into the choice of names or words which seem to suggest that somewhere in my subconscious I knew that the whole arc of the story was going to be what was going to be. I left show not really sure of what I had done, never having the focus on it really. I went back to it realizing it was actually pretty cool. A lot of people are going to be surprised at who survives from the first book, who you think is dead, and a few people are going to be surprised at who dies in the second, which is going to lead to a massive conclusion in the third book. So this was like 93, so this was like 23 years ago. And here we are. Third book still not done, but hey.
Yeah, well, I mean, Abarat came along and...
When did Abarat first start?
2001. Maybe it might have been like 99 or something when he started writing it, but I think the first book was 2001 or 2002.
Yeah,
that's been going on for years too. I mean,
yeah,
because like I said, I've been gone away from most of this stuff for the past 20 years.
And they were called
Abarat's like a new story to me. I look at it as something new. It's not old to me like
that. Yeah, I still think that way too, but that's just old people thinking, I think. Yeah. But
I have a question. I have a question for you guys. You asked me if I thought Owen Buttonbaum was the villain. What do you think of the Yad as villains? What is their motivation? I know that at one point in the book, I think it's one of the Jaiwai that says that, no, it's not one of the Jaiwai, it's one of the creatures from the Metacosm. It tells like Tesla, I think, that what the Yad want is just to come over to the Cosm and just look at us, and you know, they want to celebrate that these are the creatures who crucify people on top of the mountain. What did you think of the Yad? What is their motivation here?
Like, I guess if we extended that thing about them being like the id, then they're always being suppressed, right?
Right.
So it would be natural for them to want to come out into the world and wreak havoc and, eat people, make them crazy. So
like a Cthulhu kind of thing.
Yeah. Like elder gods, god kind of.
But if there are subconscious that we're suppressing all the time, then they want to find cracks to get out and express themselves, I guess.
When Joe Flicker enters the Yad in spirit, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that he senses that there's like a human like mind inside the Yad, right?
Yeah, yes, and that's right. I thought that was going to get paid off a little more, but I guess it's really something for us to think about.
Do you think this might be like setting up for like sorry,
third book idea? Definitely.
Yeah, third book idea. Sorry about that.
Yeah, right. Because that's really their weakness, and we never saw any kind of a weakness at all in the Great and Secret Show.
So yeah, that's a good point.
There's some kind of a human soul trapped inside.
Yeah, so I'm wondering about that. How's that going to turn out? If it's an actual like individual soul, or if it's like the Yad, if they're like our subconscious, then maybe at their core they're going to be human somehow, in terms of like their purpose or their mind or whatever collective thing they have.
Or they're humans that let their baser emotions sort of take over their world.
Mm-hmm.
What if it's like a previous character's mind? What if it's the Jaff?
Oh man! Yeah.
Oh wow, that's actually a cool idea.
Yeah, I mean that would be cool to find out.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a lot of characters to come back from the dead.
Yeah, definitely.
I like the way that you mentioned that the Yad are repressed. If we are to accept the idea that they may be like a subconscious thing, the nature of things that are repressed is just they want to break out. So maybe their only purpose is to break out into our world, like you said. That's their defining characteristic is that they want to take over. They've been repressed too long.
They're like a plague for far as like a plague.
Mm-hmm.
So then, looking at that, where do the Jaiwai fit in? I mean, I guess it's more this sort of meta story about storytelling in general, and the power of stories. But,
I like that. Even though he even describes that I don't know if this is supposed to be their true appearance, but they look like porcelain dolls.
Yeah.
They're very white. They have like these robes, and they have like these faces like porcelain dolls. They do seem to be like cosmic audience of sorts. Like they're the kind of like the readers of human history, right? I mean, they're just looking around for things that are happening, and they just want to be there and witness it.
And they feed on it. It somehow is the way that they stay alive.
Yeah,
it's like they usually feed off certain things though. Wasn't it like people's tragedy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
like death. It was
What is the line that they say, like, what happens next or what's next? I forget.
Yeah. They keep saying that. What's next? And Buddenbaum is thinking about them, and he comes up with that thing that they keep asking what's next and what's next. And so that's why they keep him alive. They want him to keep them entertained and to show them things and to set things in motion for them to witness. And then they want Tesla to do the same for them.
Are they kind of like Clive Barker's reading audience too? That's like, where's the Scarlet Gospels? Why haven't you written a sequel to The Ball?
What's next?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like the way I was reading The Dark Fantastic for some notes, and the way it was described in there, they're seemingly divine creatures, vigilant witnesses to death, destruction, and tragedy, whose appetites are never satisfied. They're just like humans, but more involved.
Yeah.
So in a way, you're kind of
I really like that.
About fans.
Yeah, I really like that you brought that up, Ryan.
Of the fans.
For some time I was reading this, I was also thinking kind of like that. Like, is this like supposed to be like the audience? Yeah. The people who are like, write the sequel to Cujo.
Yeah. Yeah. Or how come you did such a bad job directing Hellraiser Revelations?
Yes. Gosh. So yeah, I mean, I didn't take notes on everything, but it's like, I thought that Tommy, the Death Boy, he's a very cool character. I would love to see Tommy, brought to life in like a movie or a TV series.
How do you think he's gonna do with baby Amy?
I have no idea. I mean, I don't think he's capable of any sort of love or life or anything. He's essentially like empty, really.
His life is just him trying to stop those dead things from killing people.
Yeah.
They keep accidentally killing the people that he doesn't want them to kill, and now he's got a baby.
But at the same time, he embraces the fact that he's the Death Boy. And
yeah.
He says at one point, I think, something like, I'm the Death Boy. This is just the things that I do. And he's very fatalistic about... There's a particularly chilling scene where there's an accident with like a family is driving like a station wagon or something, and they get into an accident, and then the cops are there, and they see this like blonde guy show up smiling, and they've taken away the victims in an ambulance, and the cop is like, hey, what are you doing? You can't go in there. And he just goes into the car and he pulls out the corpse of the baby, and then the cop tries to shoot him and he gets away, because he sees like the spirits around Tommy,
Mm-hmm.
and then they find the baby washed with rainwater, put in the fetal position, arranged in a little kind of altar thing, but his eyes are missing, and that's such a chilling thing, you know?
Yeah. Well, and he does try to stop the ghosts from overturning Grullo's car, and because he doesn't want them to kill Amy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he gets angry when they kill Grullo, and then he's afraid they're gonna kill Amy and Joe Beth.
But at the same time, it's like I think that those spirits just react to his emotions. So in a sense, he's kind of responsible for them.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's true too. Yeah, they're out of control. I mean, and he's like, oh, he's thinking, oh no, they're getting away, and and then that sets the ghosts off to go do whatever they want to do.
There's actually Reef gets this news where it said that a couple, the woman was pregnant, and that a guy showed up and killed the woman, the pregnant woman, and ripped her open and took her baby, and it was Tommy. Yeah. So he does horrible things too. It's not just the spirits, I think.
Right, he does.
Yeah. He's kind of obsessed with this, idea of the baby.
I think maybe that might be the heart of the disappointment with Joe Beth and Tommy Ray, because Joe Beth used to have principles and character, and used to be somebody that you cared about. But she's not anymore in Everville. There's really nothing sympathetic about her anymore.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what was the dynamic of their relationship before the events of the first.
Well, and the Jaff never intended them to have this incestuous relationship that they have.
That's another thing I didn't like about having Joe Beth and them. It's just, I don't know. It kind of just if I go back and reread The Great Secret Show, it kind of affects that relationship, knowing how it turned out in Everville.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of like you really are rooting for them in The Great and Secret Show, and then in Everville, it's like, she doesn't even want him, and they catch on fire and they die.
I think that sometimes relationships between men and women in Clive Barker works are usually very dysfunctional. Like, look at Godolphin and Judith in Imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sexually, they're completely, stunted. And the same thing happens here with Joe Beth and Howie Katz.
Yeah.
Sexually, their relationship doesn't even work. And that happens with other game. She also, she's just kind of broken in certain ways.
Oh, Karis,
Yeah, Karis. I just see this kind of. I can't come up with a couple in Clive Barker stories that lived happily ever after.
Yeah.
Or that has a very functional relationship. They're always a little broken somehow. And
I guess Joe Beth and Howie were the couple that lived happily ever after until this book came out.
For like 5 years.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we've got Cabal and Lori.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Even though at the end they almost break up, but yeah.
She had to kill her. She tried to kill herself to get his attention.
The Damnation Game, that was a messed up relationship, right, between Marty and what was her name?
Karis.
Yeah.
That was a messed up relationship, right? I mean, they survived, and I don't even know if they were together by the end. I can't remember.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, well, I guess in this book you could say that Phoebe and Joe do get to live happily ever after, even though Joe becomes different at the end of the book.
He's a miss-a-me.
I like the way he that play on the name Clive did with Flicker, like a flicker of hope for Phoebe.
Oh,
yeah,
Joe Flicker.
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah. There's some funny names in this book, like for example, King Texas.
Yeah. What do you think he is? I mean, I thought that there would be a little more explanation.
Like
he seems like he used to be human, because he talks about Texas and stuff.
Maybe he was dreamt up by someone from Texas.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, there's one of the curious things about this is that once you cross into the metacosm, you see all these weird creatures, but you also see creatures who are part men, part something.
Yeah.
And Buddenbaum is thinking about his plans, like he wanted to be able to cross over into the metacosm and get the art and become like this powerful creature, become more than a man, become like a god, something without a beginning or an ending. And he does mention having talked to men who lived in Quiddity, and they crossed over somehow, and then some of them came back, others stayed there. And so there have been other people, maybe members of the shoal, who did cross over into the other world and live there. I mean, Phoebe does it. Phoebe does it, and Maeve does it. So yeah, it's a spiritual place, like a dreamlike world, but it's also physical in the sense that you can live there.
Yeah.
A human could cross over and live there, and I think that's fantastic. That's really like, it's Wonderland, really.
Isn't one of the cities that it's called Liverpool?
Yeah. That's Phoebe
created
it. I mean, Maeve created it.
Yeah, Maeve created it because she was a 12-year-old Irish girl in the beginning of the book. And I guess it's true that a lot of immigrants who came to America probably missed their homeland. So why not? And also a big nod to the fact that Clive Barker is from Liverpool.
Yeah, from Liverpool, yeah.
Yeah, and he keeps living in a port city, he keeps bringing up Sea of Isabella and Abarat and Quiddity in The Great and Secret Show and The Waters in Imagica. So I think it's something that I lived by the sea most of my life. Even if, before I went to college, I lived in a city by the sea. When I went to college, I lived in a place right by the beach. So I've always been, you kind of internalize this ocean inside of you, and you always miss it when you're not in a place that is by the sea. Like right now I'm in Arizona. I do miss it. I miss the smell of the ocean. I miss walking on sand and that's not desert. It always stays with you in a
Do you
sense.
ever feel like when you were living at the beach, you felt more like you were in a dream state?
Well,
in a way with your.
If you go to the beach at sunset, yes, absolutely. It's like one of the best things you can do is just walk by the beach when the sun is going down, and it's magical.
Yeah, it
really is. So.
I went to the beach again this past year. We're gonna go again, and my imagination was just flowing. Ideas. I was just wondering if the ocean to Clive maybe is a place for him to bring out imagination more.
He had his house in Kauai for a long time, just for that purpose.
Yeah, and
really?
One of the islands in Hawaii, right?
Yeah.
I guess one of the reasons why the ocean brings up these feelings in us is I don't want to go into like, it's genetic memory because we come from the ocean and stuff like that. I don't really believe that, but you do have a sense that when you look at the ocean, it's mysterious because you don't know what's inside it.
Yeah.
So right off the bat,
and you can't see the end of it. It goes on,
right.
in your perception, it goes on forever.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. So you just start making stories about the things that are on the other side, and that's kind of what pushed my country, my people, Portugal, into sailing out into the sea and finding other places and going around the globe and stuff and be like, hey, I wonder if I get a boat and I could hit anything, because we were surrounded on both sides by Spain, and on the other two sides it's the Atlantic. So the only way
people desire to do something.
Yeah. And so you go out and you find places like India, and you find places like China, and you find places like America. And it's a new world. That's what people call the American continent, the new world, because.
Yeah.
So in this case, the new world is a fantasy world. It's, you have these islands that can be brought up by not just people dreaming them up, but things that fell into the ocean and grew into islands.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting that sort of this frontier is the mind, right? So the story starts out with frontier pioneers who are literally exploring a new world that they've never been to before, and then the arc of the whole trilogy is really about exploring this frontier of the mind, which is a whole other world.
Yeah, I have something to ask you guys. Clive kind of breaks his own rules in this book, and it's something that he does all the time, I guess. But in this one, there's one rule that I found intriguing in particular, which is in the first book, they say you can only dip into Quiddity like 3 times in your life. Once when you're born, second time when you spend the night next to the love of your life.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a sappy romantic thing to put in, but okay. And the third time is just before you die.
Yeah.
If you dip more than 3 times, either you become something not human or you go crazy. But, in both The Great and Secret Show and this book, there's people going into the waters all the time, and they're human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they seem to do well.
Like Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's interesting.
That's a good point. That's an interesting point.
But I guess you don't know what would happen. What would happen to Joe if he came back to the world?
Interesting. I mean, probably, he would be able to survive here and function, but he would definitely look strange. But
yeah,
because he's, like you said, a mis-ami, which is something that was half dreamt, wasn't complete, and then okay. So the arc here is that Joe crosses into the Metacosm because he's running away from something that happens in the book. There's this triangle between Morton, Phoebe, and Joe, and Phoebe's married to Morton, but she's having an affair with Joe. Morton finds out, catches them in the act, beats Joe up. There's a fight, and there's a fork that gets stuck in the chest, and then Morton ends up in the hospital, and the cops are after Joe. Joe's a black guy, and he just runs away, and he goes up the mountain to try to, I guess.
You have to heal himself too, because he got his balls kicked in pretty bad, if I remember correctly.
Broken balls, yes.
Yeah.
And so he finds this creature who is the same guy that we see in the first part of the book, when the travelers, the people in the wagons, they hear the trumpet. It was up the mountain ceremony taking place where there were 2 warring families from the Metacosm that had crossed over into that mountain to make a marriage, to come to peace, and that their marriage would result in a baby. And so little Maeve, even though the creature that saves her tells her, you have to go back the way you came, you can't follow me, this is not for you, she actually just follows him and finds the ceremony with all these like creatures in robes and feathers and beaks and stuff. And so she goes into the tent and she finds this couple, and they're like meditating, and there's this weird substance floating around them, and she interprets it as they're making a baby, and her words kind of disrupt the whole ceremony. And then balls, and the 2 warring families just start killing each other, and that's the big cataclysm that happens. But so the male groom from that ceremony, he just stays there. He's the only guy who survives the whole thing, apart from the other creature, Coker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Coker.
And so he stays there, and he's the creature that Joe finds at the top of the mountain. And this is because there's a little portal there that's still open. And so he still has this idea that he's immortal, so he can wait as long as it takes, but he's just waiting for someone to walk past that beach on the other side, and he can tell them, hey, can you open this up so I can go back? And so I guess through the ages that crack got a little wider, but so Joe escapes with that creature called Noah,
right?
A very biblical name. And he goes into the Metacosm, and then they sail back to a tricky named kingdom, Khmer El Sabat or something.
Yeah, that's it.
So yeah,
that's it.
And I always wondered why did the Jaff go to so much trouble to create his own hole when there are ones like this, where people just come through to have ceremonies and stuff.
Yeah, and my idea
makes the Jaff look a little less powerful.
Yeah,
right.
Or he didn't really understand the art like he thought it too. So
yeah,
and so this brings up the question of could the shoal open up portals like this? the guys who open from the Metacosm, they call them the Blessed Men, and they're kind of like shamans or priests or something. And I don't think it's very well accepted to open up a gateway between the two worlds. So it's kind of a risky thing to do. So I'm wondering, why did those two warring factions come over to Earth to make a baby?
Yeah, it seems to me that the chances of having a screw up are pretty high when you're going to a different place where you don't know everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it makes for an awesome opening. It makes for a great tableau in the first part. But I'm just wondering, couldn't they just have done that on the beach on the other side of that door?
Yeah, and then have guards and make sure nobody can interrupt them.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Good point.
Yeah, some parts here that I just try to understand the motivation between. Were they trying to colonize the world? Were they trying to come over here and create a life here? A lot of questions in this book.
Yeah.
A lot of questions about this mythology, but all of them good because they make your mind try to work it out. So
the middle books in a trilogy always have a lot of questions, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, like Aberrat 3 is really big that way too. There's a lot of new elements that get kind of thrown in.
Yeah, and the fantasy world invades the normal world, like in the second book, like the Sea of Isabella floods a whole city in
Chicken Town.
Chicken Town, right. So it's always like a clash between the fantastic and the real in Clive's books.
Yeah. What were those fish though? The gold-eyed fish that Joe were they fish or an octopus?
The shoe.
Fish. He just ate the fish. He didn't want to eat the octopus. The octopus was a little Zarapushu.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which apparently
that's.
Yeah.
They're like little pieces of divinity, and they have a collective mind.
And they keep the whatever the Eid. How do you pronounce it?
Yeah, the Eid Ouroboros.
There's a big one, the giant one that keeps it at bay.
Until Noah stabs it.
No, yeah, exactly. Kills and he kills Joe in the process too, doesn't he? Because Joe didn't want to kill it. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought Noah, he starts out being a sympathetic character, was the groom in that wedding, so he was trying to make peace and he was getting married and they were making a baby. So you see him as kind of a creator, like a creature who's like probably royalty in his kingdom. Mm-hmm. And then you see him and he meets Joe and he's very frail and he just wants to go back home. But then once he crosses over, he just starts becoming a huge dick.
Yeah, he enslaves everybody he sees.
Yeah. And so I'm like, wow, so these warring factions were trying to make peace, but who knows how long that would have lasted.
Yeah.
Because, this guy wasn't obviously a very good character. I particularly like the interaction when Joe is on a boat with Noah and he comes to the realization that the crew of the boat have been enslaved and they're not really, they're like zombies in a way.
Yeah, they're zombies, yeah.
And he just works them to death.
Yeah, he just works. So Joe tells him, I don't like this slavery stuff. Look at me.
Yeah.
Because he's a black guy. So he's like, of course he's going to be against slavery. But then Noah kind of is very mischievous because he goes like, okay, well, I'll release them. But in exchange for me releasing them, then my debt to you is over. So I'm not going to give you any riches or power anymore.
Yeah.
And that kind of sets Joe a little back, and he's like, oh, okay, I guess we'll just wait until we get wherever we're going. But so he kind of concedes, and I thought that was this kind of weird, awkward moment there because
he falls off the boat, doesn't he? And there's like a sex scene between him and Phoebe in the ocean.
Yeah, which is interesting because Phoebe's sleeping, but she crosses over in her dream state.
Yeah, the dream state.
And so he hears her on the other side, which very fascinating. And they end up making love in a dreamlike dance under the water. But I thought that was particularly interesting. I remember in the first book, I think I might be misremembering it, but in the first book, wasn't there supposed to be under the water in Quiddity? You could see like swimming people that were dreaming and couples too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought it was a nice return to that because they do go underwater to make love, and they're lovers. They're spending the night in Quiddity because they're the love of each other's life. So,
were you happy with the way he explored more Quiddity in Everville?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I think in the Great and Secret Show, it really was just the ephemeris, right? It was just the island with the souls, and that was really all there was.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
no cities or anything like that he talked about. It was just what you said.
Yeah, in the introduction to this book that he wrote, I'm not entirely sure what was the edition, but he says, I offer in the introduction to the Great and Secret Show concerning the origins. I'm sorry. I won't repeat here the observations I offer in the introduction to the Great and Secret Show concerning the origins of Quiddity. Rather, let me explore a little of how the concept develops in this book. The Dream Sea in Great and Secret Show, the Dream Sea is viewed through a door that stands a little ajar. There's one brief scene in the Dream Sea toward the end of the novel, but it offers little more than a teasing peep at the other world. In Everville, both city and book, that door swings open wide and we're pulled through it to begin a more detailed acquaintance with the place. The nature of the book changes once we become voyagers. If the tropes of what is dubbed horror fiction, the glimpsed otherness, the remote unspeakable evil, are used as the underpinnings of the Great and Secret Show, then it is the elements of fantasy, in its most conventional definitions, that are offered in Everville, the voyage to distant islands, the exploration of a great strange city, here called Bekether Sabat, the fabulous life forms. But the nature of Quiddity and the half-revealed secrets of its origins provide me with the opportunity for some interesting riffs. And he goes on to talk about how the city in the book is made up from remembered fragments from a city I know very well, Liverpool. I disagree a little bit with what he says here. I think in the first book we do get a big glimpse of Quiddity. I mean, the whole party gets sucked into it. We have people swimming in it, floating around. They go into islands and stuff. So we do get to see a lot of Quiddity in the first book.
I wanted to talk about how, if y'all agreed with me on this, how he did. I liked how he put a lot of the women in this particular story in power roles, like with Tesla and even Maeve. He talks about it on his page how.
She shaped two cities.
I mean, she was the founder of Everville.
Yeah, well, and the Liverpool of.
And Phoebe too. Phoebe's also very determined, very empowered in the story. Mm-hmm. I think it just comes from the way Clive likes to write about. Females in his book are always very empowered. They're very. He doesn't just put men in positions of power. He puts men and women in positions of power. And he makes goddesses and women a more benevolent sort of power than male power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I looked on a quote on his on Revelations that Maeve is named after a Celtic goddess. Is that true?
I guess the origin of the name might be that. Yeah.
Yeah. He was talking about it.
I didn't really quick look as you're talking. Maybe is the first. Says here in Wikipedia says Maybe is a first name of Irish origin. In Irish Gaelic, the name Medve or Medve means she who intoxicates. It is rooted in the Irish legend of Queen Maeve or Medbe, one of the main protagonists of the early Irish legend Tain Bo Collinge. I don't know if I'm pronouncing these names remotely well. But it says here, it's associated with the fairy queen, Queen Mab of Irish and English legend. So there you go.
I just thought in this book that the women roles were there were so many women that were very powerful.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there were probably some townsfolk that were not so great.
but then again, I spent a while since, in Magica there were women that had big power roles, but I remember the only one being particularly powerful in that one was Judith, right?
And Quasar too, I think her. Yeah.
But I've not read Galilee or I've not read that yet.
Well, and you could also say that there's the goddesses in Magica, and there's also the fact that Pio Pa isn't really man or woman.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Also, in this book, when Buddenbaum is at the crossroads during the festival, he's trying to get to the medallion that's buried at the crossroads, and he sees like these women come up from the ground, right? Or am I misremembering this?
Yeah, that's right. And some of the townspeople see that too.
Yeah. So I was just wondering if those were just ghosts like Erwin, or if they were, ghosts from people who used to live there, because apparently ghosts have a social life after death. Erwin is one of the characters who gets killed by Kassoon, and he becomes this disembodied spirit, and then he meets other spirits of people who used to live in that city, and they tell them, yeah, we're coming in for the festival. We don't have anything better to do, so we're just here to watch the festival. So
I thought they were the Jaiwai that were disguised.
Was it? No, I'm talking about like when he meets one of the people who wrote that confession, who.
The guys that hang out in the cemetery.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about when the townspeople started seeing these angels at the crossroads.
Oh, you think those were the Jaiwai?
I think it's possible. I wouldn't say 100%.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about now.
Okay, because I thought that they also are shown in actual physical form, like that one of them looks like a little girl, the other looks like a guy who's holding 6 ice cream cones. Mm-hmm. So they're not described as being like these angels.
No, but they are described as they seldom don't show their real face, and they disguise themselves.
Right, that could be it. That could be it then. Okay.
But what you were talking about, Jose, was the ghost characters that from the cemetery he meets up with, and don't they end up getting killed somehow?
Yeah, they get sucked up into the. They get sucked up into
a vortex at the crossroads, I think.
Well, another interesting thing is the medallion, the Shoal medallion itself, because in the Great and Secret Show, the Jaff tells Tesla that it doesn't have power by itself. The power of it is understanding what it means, what a symbol means, and then you own it. But here, the Shoal medallion is powerful.
Or maybe the crossroads have power.
Yeah, and crossroads you said were very powerful. I remember you told me once, Jose.
Yeah, and
crossroads.
Yeah, you said crossroads were replaced, where dead people were buried or something like that.
Suicides.
Yeah,
people who committed suicide couldn't be buried in hallowed ground, so they wouldn't be buried in a religious cemetery. So people would just bury them in a crossroad outside of town. This is like old practice, Nobody does that anymore, but. But crossroads have always been considered symbolic in the sense that, there's two different flows of human activity interacting with each other. It's always been very symbolic in the sense that that's how cultures evolve. I was watching a documentary the other day about the rise of Greek culture and how all those, as soon as they started sailing out from the islands and they started meeting other people, some of these tribes would start copying things that they saw from other cultures into their own. And so that's how they started building their own culture, was by interacting with other human civilizations. So as soon as two flows of human activity get together, they not only initiate a trade of goods, but they initiate a trade of culture. So in that sense, there's power in crossroads, I guess, because, what I just said.
Yeah, well, and you've got... And here you've got a crossroads between our world and the world of Quiddity and the Ephemeris and the Cosm and the Metacosm and the Sapus Humana and all those other guys.
Yeah, and that place was already symbolic to begin with. They already had power because it was a chosen spot for these creatures from another world to come into our plane and make a peace agreement. So they already chose that place somehow. For reasons that were never told, but and so Buddenbaum wanted to set a seed for something there, for a city, I guess, but we're never really explained why that place had such significance.
Other than that he wanted to create a story there.
Yeah.
There was something Clive said in the Lord of Illusions commentary about how sometimes he leaves some of the stuff like that, like you were talking about. He likes audiences maybe to use their own imagination sometimes and come up with the answers.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
I mean,
what we're
maybe
doing
things
right
like
now.
that.
Yeah.
Oh shit. Well, true. So that was just
I think there's a certain
what you were
tragedy.
talking about.
There's a certain tragedy and also a certain description of human nature in the sense that Harmon in the beginning of the book is talking about how we're going to make it, we're going to take our wagons over to this place and we're going to settle down. We're going to build a beautiful city. We're going to call it Everville, and it's going to be a wonderful city of spires like Byzantium or other places like. And then these small-minded people, these small-minded like petty people are like, well, I don't want to live in that city. That sounds crappy. I'm not going to be living in a cage that you decide to build. So it's like, yeah, like we could have cities like big fantasy cities, and instead we just have strip malls and residential areas. And
Yeah.
We could live in these wonderful spire-filled metropolises, but it's just not practical. And I guess people are just like, no, I'd rather have like a Home Depot and a Safeway close to me. It'll make my property value go up, right, Ryan?
Yeah, right.
Home Depot is right across the street from me.
Yeah, it's like, if you build a pool or if you build something fancy in your house, you might bring the value down. And the homeowner association doesn't like it. So there you go.
All right. Well, I think
very awesome book, really. I mean, fantastic. You can read it as a standalone book as well, I think. So.
Yeah. I think it's probably better to read The Great and Secret Show first, but not 100% mandatory.
Yeah. Ideally, read the first book of the art and then read this one, and you have plenty of time to wait for the third volume.
Yeah. I mean, Abarat is probably both Abarat books are going to come out first before there's ever a third book of the art, I would imagine.
I hope so, yeah, because Clive is really focusing on Abarat.
Yeah.
That's what he considers his legacy, I guess. It might have been either in the Midnight Meat Train DVD or the Book of Blood DVD that there's a featurette where he's painting and someone was filming him painting. And he points at the paintings and he says, as a gay man, I'm not going to have any kids. These are my kids. So he sees Abarat as kind of like his legacy. Like Abarat is to Clive Barker like Lord of the Rings is to Tolkien.
Yeah. And he's also been a real perfectionist about Abarat, which is why the pace on them is not ideal, I guess, for instance, making them into movies. I mean, if it takes 7 years between two books, then they're not gonna crank out like Harry Potter books.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of people out there, and I don't want to bring any controversy into this, but sometimes some authors use what's called ghostwriting. If they're I'm not saying that J.K. Rowling did this, but I'm saying that some authors do what's called, like, they do the outline and they write themselves the major chapters, like the beginning, the end, and a few chapters in the middle. And then the rest of the book is kind of, written from the outline that the author has by ghostwriters. This is something that happened in modern publishing world. I mean, not a lot of authors do that, but I guess a bunch of them do.
Did you guys ever hear? Sorry, go ahead.
And that's not something that Clive does. That's just what I was trying to say. He takes his time. These things are polished little. It's like making jewelry in a way. It takes time, but it takes craftsmanship. It's not something that's pedestrian. That's done like in a serial way. Mm-hmm. So there you go.
Yeah. Did you guys ever hear that rumor, going back to this ghostwriting thing, about V.C. Andrews' books were written by a computer?
No, I've never heard of that.
I'd heard that one time, and somebody told me that like it was fact. I mean, I can't imagine that that's really true. But then I don't know the first thing about V.C. Andrews, and I've never
not familiar with him again.
Yeah. I just know those are the books that you have to get past when you're looking at a bookshelf trying to find Clive Barker.
Well,
yeah,
I know that there's software out there that helps people write screenplays. So I wonder if that's what they were talking about.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, well. So Everville, my impressions on the book were amazing, and the third time around, you start seeing all those little references from other books that you've read in the meantime. Because when I read this book, I had only read, I think, Cabal, Great and Secret Show, and the Books of Blood. So, and maybe a Magica?
Yeah, Magica was like 91, so.
And then after that, of course, I've read the rest of Clive Barker's body of work. And so now you can read at it and you can see these little things, like these little elements that he puts in stories sometimes. And you see like, oh, I see what you put this in here because it's a recurring theme that you put in other books of yours and stuff. So it's interesting to see. The second time around, you always get a better insight into the book. So very fabulous book.
I think, yes, agree with Jose. It's a great book. I think it was I felt kind of down and sad at the end, but being a middle book, that's kind of way like Empire Strikes Back. You kind of trilogies have the middle trilogies are supposed to be darker and kind of sad.
Kissoon is kind of like Skeletor because he gets sucked up into the Ead and just disappears. It's got he who fights and runs away, He-Man.
Something, Rob. Yeah, I think you're onto something, Rob, when you mentioned that the thing at the core of the yacht could be Kissoon. I mean, we never know.
Maybe, yeah, you never know.
Yeah.
I mean, not Kissoon, but the Jaff.
Oh, the Jaff, right.
Because
right.
I mean, I think the Jaff will make a return in the next book.
Maybe, yeah. Well, we know that Kissoon will.
Yeah.
So,
but I love the book, and I definitely would recommend it to anybody that's starting out.
Yeah, it's an awesome book. Yeah. All right, so thanks a lot, guys, for joining us for the discussion of Everville.
Yeah.
Take care, guys.
Yeah, and next up we're going to be, well, I guess we don't know what order these are going to be in. I was going to say next up is the Duels of Blood round 3, but that might end up getting posted first.
Yeah, let's see. Okay.
You can find the show notes for this page and lots of Clive Barker's news and features at www.clivebarkercast.com. Please follow us on Twitter, @BarkerCast or @OccupyMidian. Like us on Facebook and join the Occupy Midian Facebook group. You can listen on the site or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Libsyn, TuneIn, Pocket Casts, Google Play, and Double Twist. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Please take a couple of minutes and leave us a review on iTunes. It means the world to us and helps us spread the word about Clive Barker. The Clive Barker Podcast, or BarkerCast, is an independent editorial fan site and podcast that's not affiliated with or under contract by Clive Barker or Seraphim Films. This is a labor of love by the fans, for the fans.
Thanks for listening.